I have an urgent message for America, and I pray that it reaches you, at least those of you who have to understand what is happening to you. I'm trying to get you folks to understand this is how the smoke and mirrors works. You got to know the facts, and if we came together, we could overcome the corruption that's murdering us all.
I'm just trying to make the world aware of the truth, and I've got it.
I'm motivated this morning to just kind of riff on again, reactions to people that I pay attention to, more so than others, that are expressing a certain desire to understand how the system works and how this information that I'm trying to convey to you fits in and what unfortunately everybody seems to be missing. So I think for those who have no idea who I am and might see these things popping up in different social media threads, because I have an incredible network of women that I call the angels that are just hell-bent for leather to get these truths to the world, because they were victims of what it is that I'm trying to make the rest of the country aware of. Now, to that point, as late as 2012, there was 16 million filed foreclosures as it related to the 2008 Great Financial Crisis. And I know that most people that I pay attention to that I think have relatively decent records put that number at approximately 10 million homes foreclosed upon, of which, based on the information that we have accrued and aggregated, some of which we've shown in season 1 of The Con, much of which is on the sidelines because we're stagnant and we can't get to the second season of The Con, reveal that I believe all of these were illegal. I think there were illegal loans to begin with, and I think there were illegal foreclosures that took place, particularly as it relates to the 2015 national mortgage settlement and all of the terms that were supposed to rein in what we call the servicers and the foreclosure mills and so forth. If you're wondering who I am basically a producer, I'm a journalist, and I'm a modern day muckraker. If you don't know who muckrakers are, I highly encourage you to do a Google search and look into it, but I might be at least aspiring sort of Upton Sinclair by way of what the system of our power is actually today, that everybody is intuitive about, but nobody can understand. And quite frankly, you can't fight what you can't see. And I think the subject of what I want to talk about this morning in a very brief way, if I may, is the nature of media on the side of the people that are asking the right questions. So I've been on this incredibly long journey. I've been trying to piece together what took shape or what took place to cause the great financial crisis of 2008 that destroyed my life. And in me trying to pick up the pieces, I had to pull the thread to try to find out what the hell caused that madness and then ultimately what the big picture was. And I was very fortunate because I went on a many year journey, and my team and I are very adequate at what we do, and we were able to put together what the New York Times, the FBI, the DOJ, the Chicago Tribune, the Miami Herald, the LA Times, and all of these sources, and MSNBC and everybody else didn't do because they're paid not to do it. Now, I know that sounds a little bit ridiculous, but hear me out on this. So this morning, among other things, as I was listening to two things that are, again, are a convergence of really where we have to be on this whole thing. So Joe Rogan, again, is incredibly in the zeitgeist, but I'm sure if you're Joe, you'd rather not be under these circumstances. But what started off as maybe him spreading misinformation as it relates to COVID, became the focal point of the ire between the mainstream media and online media as it relates to this topic. And as I've said in a couple of these videos that I've been producing every day so far for the last week, that mainstream media has been obfuscating and hiding the truth of the great financial crisis and really power, literally for now decades, but really on overdrive since the 2008 great financial crisis. And again, the main players in the echo chamber of cable media, like Tucker Carlson and Rachel Maddow, are simply entertainers. That's what their actual legal staffs of those two entities successfully argued because they don't want to be held for libel. And quite frankly, whether it's Russiagate on Rachel Maddow's side or pretty much anything Fox does, it is always misinformation 24/7 at all times. I'm a little bit suspect of why people come down on Russiagate, because I know for a fact, and I'm close to the information, that Donald Trump has been involved with Deutsche Bank for a very long time. He gets loans based on what we show in the con, which is part of a control fraud that Deutsche Bank, a huge bank from Germany, one of the largest in the world, was doing exactly what all of our banks were doing, which is laid out in our documentary series, The Con. Now, this morning, Crystal Ball and Sagar and Genti were doing, I think, a very good kind of retrospective analysis on exactly who was funding potentially this come down on Joe Rogan, and a lot of ties lead to some of the big players like Jeff Bezos and a couple of other billionaires that are supportive of what you might call the Democratic side. Why wouldn't they be? All of these billionaires play both sides, but some lean blue, some lean red, but the bottom line is they own the system. And, I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case, but, in their analysis, what they're talking about is, okay, we went from this misinformation situation into it being an identity politics issue, particularly as it relates to this mashup that someone edited together of Joe Rogan using the N-word, which, of course, when you watch it in continuity, you find that it's taking a lot of things out of context. I mean, he might be saying the N-word by repeating what somebody like a comedian like Dave Chapelle might have said, or a song that Snoop Dogg may have said, but yet they're acting as if in this continuity, because anybody can edit anything together to tell a story, and they can tweak it any way they want. That Joe Rogan is obviously in the crosshairs of being somebody that we wouldn't want to listen to under those circumstances, right? But meanwhile, I sent this message to Joe Rogan's gatekeeper over the weekend and yesterday, and I've been sending it to Russell Brand's people as well. And Russell Brand simultaneously interviewed one of my favorite journalists of all time, the guy that was very influential on me chasing this dragon, and his name is Matt Taibbi. He used to work for Rolling Stone. He's gone independent. He writes for Substack. I like what he does mostly. I find him slightly different than what he used to be, but I'll come back to that in a moment. But Russell Brand finally interviewed Matt Taibbi. I've been waiting Matt for a long time. It appears on Luminary. I highly encourage everybody to check it out. He's checking me out so they can understand what I'm trying to tell you. That Russell and Crystal are, again, continually trying to find and suss out what is creating this populist wave behind Trump. What is the corruption? Who's telling the truth? Who's in control? Follow the money? All of those sorts of scenarios. And in that dialogue, and both of those dialogues, quite frankly, I'll start with Joe Rogan and Crystal Ball. I mentioned to Matt Stoggs, Joe Rogan's gatekeeper, over and over and over, listen, if you're not racist, which I know Joe Rogan's not racist. I don't know why I know that. I'm absolutely certain that's the case. But I'm providing you the opportunity to prove it in an incredibly heroic and humongous way. Why? Because African Americans were targeted heavily. I mean, it's outrageous, the collateral damage that the 2008 Great Financial Crisis did to the household wealth of African Americans. 60% of household African American wealth dissipated because of the Great Financial Crisis. There was predation, loans, and particularly, this is really fascinating. I want you to take a step back. I want you to think about people that you have in your mind of African Americans getting homes. A lot of people think that that particular vision are people that could never afford to pay back the house, and the government forced banks to lend under community reinvestment standards that was just a setup for a failure. First of all, that's incredibly incorrect and insulting, because there are many, many people in the African American community that have jobs, for example, working in a lot of places that you might imagine. Maybe it's the local supermarket, maybe it's in fast food, but they have income and they can afford to buy and finance homes that are in their price range that give them an opportunity to get a leg up. And the whole idea of home ownership in American society is that hopefully your home, your asset value that you pay your mortgage month in and month out until you have a mortgage burning party because you paid off your loan, that when you own that house, let's hopefully, decades later, after you've, spent your lifetime saving and living in that house and raising a family and so forth, that house has increased in value. And so therefore you've invested in yourself and your net worth increases. Now, this got so bad, and I've got evidence of this because I produce a podcast called The New Untouchables, where we had a whistleblower who actually worked inside Wells Fargo, a woman by the name of Beth Stoops Jacobson, who revealed that Wells Fargo, for example, targeted African Americans of all socioeconomic standing. And this could be doctors, for example. This could be professionals living within the Beltway in Washington, D.C. Maybe they come out as a high-level colonel, for example, in the United States military, and they can afford homes, and they got the worst loans imaginable and were targeted and predated upon by Wells Fargo. Now, all of the banks were involved with this, but we have the evidence of Wells Fargo, and we also have the evidence that Beth Stoops Jacobson took this evidence literally not only to the New York AG, and she went to the Department of Justice and the FBI, both of whom ignored this information. It was the smoking gun that would have proved if Congress and the DOJ actually went full bore with an investigation into what was going on, what it is that I'm telling you. But instead, of course, they ignored it, just like all of the major media. Now, to come back to Russell Brand and to come back to Joe Rogan, and they're all about cancel culture. The whole notion that millions of people are paying attention to and fighting and struggling over at the moment is A, the misinformation, and B, how it can be tweaked into a culture war, identity politic, and between what is going on with MAGA and Black Lives Matter and all of the things that have come out of that, justifiably in many ways and not so much in others. But the bottom line is that these guys are constantly talking about the problem without the details. It's insane. Now, interestingly enough, Matt Taibbi, I'm absolutely convinced, knows everything I know and maybe much more. I would love to unlock his brain. I've had conversations with Matt Taibbi. He called me after he actually appeared on Joe Rogan, and I listened to the episode, and I swear to God, I thought Taibbi at that time had seen our work in the con, was actually talking about the con, because he started with predation on African Americans and then he moved up the system and what it all means. Now, granted, Taibbi did all the work that inspired me from, the disparity of justice, of course, I could just go on and on. I mean, it's like reading Matt Taibbi to me is like listening to Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy. Every song is one that is memorable for unbelievable reasons, and I highly encourage you to get online and to check out all of his stuff. But the point is, he never got to the guys that were the regulators who actually knew how to police this stuff and how they were prevented from doing so. It makes absolutely no sense to me that was not really a focus of what Taibbi did downstream, and I guess I'm grateful that he didn't because he gave us the opportunity to do it. But I've been trying to get Taibbi involved with us for now close to a decade. In fact, if you ever do watch our show, The Con, I had envisioned having Matt Taibbi be what I had to play because, Matt Taibbi just didn't have the time or he didn't want to do it. And, he moved on to a different space, I guess if I'm Matt Taibbi, it's kind of like how many different times can I tell the story? Well, I can tell you that Matt Taibbi didn't tell the story that we're telling you that ends up at the Federal Reserve. And that's something that I've been saying in previous video clips. But Russell Brand interviewed Taibbi, and they're talking about what created this populism behind the MAGA movement. And they just missed a hugely important point. Basically, Trump plagiarized Bernie. It wasn't the other way around. Taibbi describes that, Bernie basically was sabotaged by his own party, which he was. But I have firsthand evidence that Bernie Sanders was being consulted by the guy who was my mentor on this whole project, William K. Black. And that's why Bernie Sanders said in the 2016 election, Wall Street's business model is fraud, but he chose not to follow it up. I can tell you that other people that should be completely in the game about corruption, that know how it works and know details, who aren't in academia, do so because they're playing the game on the inside. They're not willing to speak declaratively, which is the entire problem. So if we're going to put a bucket on this, right, the first sand bucket is Crystal Ball particularly, who myself and my colleague Eric Vaughn appeared on the Kyle and Crystal show 1 week after Russell Brand and 1 week before David Sirota. Now, the reason why that's relevant is David Sirota, I hope many of you know, but many of you probably don't know. David Sirota is a great journalist. He has a fantastic kind of a populist website. He came out of the Bernie Sanders campaign. He's been in D.C. for a long time. He's a journalist. And he ended up working with Adam McKay, the writer-director of what most people might know some of his work with Talladega Nights and some fantastic comedies like Anchorman, and then also Moneyball. But he did The Big Short. And by the way, The Big Short's a thumbnail of what we put into The Con. In fact, if you want to understand what The Con is, it's the last 5 minutes of what The Big Short tees up. And we answer all the questions that The Big Short had at the end of that film, which I will remind you, made somewhere in the vicinity of $200 million, but it didn't deliver the truth. And this has been this entire problem from day one. And so Russell Brand is trying to figure out what corruption is and how it works. But he doesn't know the ABCs of how the financial crisis was created and ultimately how it covered up. And therein lies answers to every question that these guys are asking. And Joe Rogan, if you're not, again, racist, The Con reveals that 60% of African-American household wealth evaporated because it was targeting predation from the professionals to people that were living on fixed income in the African-American community. And eventually it got everybody. And those details are incredible. And I just don't understand why the gatekeepers with Russell and Joe refuse to listen and look at our material because of who knows. I don't want to put this on Russell and I don't want to put this on Joe, because if I'm those guys, I'm trying to prep for a next thing. I'm trying to deal with millions of different questions that are being brought up every single day. And you got plenty on your plate. You rely on your gatekeepers to be able to make you aware of what it is that's going on out there in the ether. But since the gatekeepers aren't doing it, for whatever sort of high school sort of maneuvering that I believe these guys are engaged in, and I don't have any idea, what the story is. But again, if you're looking for credibility, again, I was on Crystal Ball and Sagar, I was on Sagar and Crystal Ball over a year ago. And then we had wonderful reviews in a number of publications like The Guardian and The Daily Beast and many others. I highly encourage everybody to check it out on our website at www.thecon.tv. But, I could carry on and I could carry on, so I'm just going to end it off with this. Don't talk about cancel culture and don't defend yourself against racism if you're not willing to show the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that addresses exactly what you're in the crosshairs of, because mainstream media, I'm talking Rachel Maddow's side of the equation, I'm talking Tucker Carlson's side of the equation, Don Lemmon, Anderson Cooper, when I watch those guys, they don't even come close to knowing what world they live in. They just listen to people that somebody who is a producer says, this guy's got a book to sell and he's a professional within the Beltway, so let's listen to him. And basically what those guys are is PR people to once again scratch and sniff their way out of what the real story is, which is massive, massive, massive criminality that, again, begins with Fed funding because of the Federal Reserve Act 13.3, which allowed systemic emergency lending that gave Wall Street $29 trillion in 2009 to ultimately then buy toxic assets to get it off their books so these guys could do it again. And for the last 10 years, they've been up to their eyeballs in whether it was stock buybacks or some sort of clearinghouse of getting more and more toxic assets on the government's books to be able to show short-term profits and asset management that they could hyperinflate so that it looks like the stock market's doing well, so therefore the economy's doing well. But I think most of us now understand after this many years that if the stock market's doing well, it's not an indication if Main Street's doing well. The bottom line is they operate up here at everybody else's expense, and for whatever reason, even the guys that are asking the right questions, who want to know the right answers, are canceling the people who have the answers, which is us. Every single day I'm going to keep bringing these truths until it catches on. Russell, if you're listening to me and this comes your way, I'm a huge fan. I love what you do. I listen to you every day because, quite frankly, I need to. The information that you're bringing to the world is fantastic. Please stop ignoring this. Once you see it, You can't unsee it, and it will change everything for you, because we did what the Department of Justice, the FBI, the SEC, AGs around the country, and all of the other alphabet soup of regulatory agencies, from the Office of Thrift Supervision, which no longer exists because it got blown up because of the 2008 great financial crisis, and most ultimately, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, who plays this stuff for the banks on behalf of the government. So if you want to understand, and I think this is important, most of you out there, if you're MAGAs, you go to Q. A lot of people like to go into the Rothschild scenario. A lot of people like to talk about the Illuminati. A lot of people like to talk about powerful people that are behind the scenes in the shadow sector, and where they came from, the Skull and Bone Society at Yale, the Ivy League, and everything else. And what I'm here to tell you is, I think the framing of that is a boogeyman, but it doesn't make what your intuition is informing you incorrect. They all operate that way, but they do it right in front of your face. As a matter of fact, I saw a headline right before I decided to record this that shows, and I've got direct connection to him, and if anybody out there wants to put some pressure in the right place, Senator Sherrod Brown, who's quite frankly always been on the right side of this thing, but there's some questionable stuff that took place after 2008 because they were cleaning this up, and they silenced a lot of people within their own party who knew the truth. Senator Sherrod Brown has got in the crosshairs once again Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase, the largest bank in the United States, who, in my opinion, as a shortcut, literally owns the United States, that company, and under his leadership. And I think he told Barack Obama and Eric Holder how to handle the situation. Jamie Dimon has been involved with all sorts of grifts. He's a recidivist. His company's a recidivist. There was five indictments against Chase, including a RICO conviction for trading of insider trading and the way that they manipulated the heavy metals market. And there's more. There's always more. But the bottom line is, it's not rocket science. It's just so much noise, so much misinformation, and so many people that just can't slow down long enough to go, oh, the con has it all. And that's what our country is. Please check out our work at www.thecon.tv. Please continue watching and sharing these videos. I hope you get on the bandwagon and pressure Joe Rogan and Russell Brand to understand that we have what they're looking for, unless, of course, they're not, which makes them just as fake media as fake media. And I hope that's not the case. Have a great day, guys. I'll talk to you later. I just made a promise to myself that I was going to find the answers.